In the heart of a bustling city, I stumbled upon a harrowing scene. A battered woman, desperately seeking refuge from a ruthless gang demanding responsibility for her plight. Her anguished eyes and the gang's fierce threats painted a grim picture. Yet, as I stepped in to help, the woman's hidden identity revealed an astonishing truth that left me reeling. Her secret was far more than I could have ever imagined, shaking the very foundation of my understanding and transforming the situation in ways I never expected. Do you really think you can fool my sister and get away with it? You had better get this right. I once ran into a weak-looking, extremely beautiful high school girl in the park while driving her to the hospital. I decided to care for her at my house because she said she had nowhere else to go. But shortly after, a black high-end car pulled up in front of my apartment, and someone began tapping the intercom repeatedly. I was terrified as I cautiously opened the door to find a gruff-looking man with obvious criminal ties standing there. He yelled, "I want that girl back." As his forehead veins swelled, I was taken to a mansion with few or no options. My name is Richard. My love of books compelled me to pursue a career in librarianship. To be honest, it doesn't pay well, but I enjoy spending every day among my favorite books. On her day off, a uniformed high school girl wandered into the library one morning. I couldn't help but stare at her because of her stunning features and glossy black hair. It was as if she were watching a movie while reading. I kept looking at her as I arranged the shelves, and I even misplaced a couple of books. She spent the entire day reading until it was time to close. After reflecting on my mistakes the day before, I resolved to improve the following day. Yesterday was a real mess for me. She shouldn't be here today because it's Monday, and I need to concentrate. However, I was surprised to see her return shortly after the library opened. She was dressed in her uniform. Asterisk indicates that there may be a brief closure of the school. Asterisk. She stayed until closing time once more, and the next day, and the day after that. Nothing changed for 5 days straight. She was in the library all day. My coworkers were whispering to one another by then. She comes in every day. What is happening at her school? October is a month with no significant holidays, so her consistent attendance at the library gave the impression that she had a reason for being there. Inquisitive, I decided to speak with her. "Hello, you must be a high school student. Are you enrolled in a particular high school?" She stood up and rushed out, terrified. She was moving too fast for me to keep up with. So I lost sight of her. She never returned to the library after that day. I couldn't help but worry about her well-being because I didn't know her name or how to contact her. There was nothing I could do. All I could do was pray she was fine. 3 days later, I had to make a detour due to road construction. On my way home from work, I passed through the park. I noticed a uniformed girl sitting on a bench. Asterisk. That is the girl from high school. Asterisk. "Hey, you are the girl from the other day, correct?" I rushed over to greet her. She responded, "No, don't look at me." She quickly covered her face with her hands, shocked. Her outfit was slightly soiled and her hair was a little messy. I questioned, concerned. "What is your name?" Her name was Emily. She gave a nervous reply. "Did you spend the night here? How is your family doing?" She clung to my arm, pleading for help. "Please do not contact my parents or school." Emily appeared pale, which made me worry even more. October has seen a lot of nice days lately, but chilly snaps can strike at any time. Furthermore, it is clear that a high school girl napping in her uniform in a park is extremely risky. I nodded silently and chose to listen to her story because I knew that if I reprimanded her now, she would most likely turn and run away again. "All right, I understand. Please relax." I only released my arm in relief and passed out on the bench right away. "Emily, are you all right?" When I repeatedly shouted her name and gave her a shake, she didn't respond. In a state of panic, I called for an ambulance. Not long after the ambulance arrived. When the paramedic inquired about my connection to Emily, I paused for a second. Emily appeared to have a valid reason for not wanting anyone to contact her parents or school. However, if I claimed to be a stranger, they might investigate and contact her family. Anyhow, I lied and claimed to be her brother. And after a moment of hesitation, I accompanied her to the hospital. Emily fortunately wasn't seriously ill. She hadn't eaten in 3 days, which caused anemia and dizziness, according to Dr. Smith. To allay Dr. Smith's suspicions, I told him about my sister's recent dieting. I stayed by her side until she healed because I couldn't just leave her. She was feeling much better after receiving IV fluids throughout the night, and she expressed gratitude to me. I apologize for any inconvenience. I appreciate you paying the bills and lying to the hospital staff. I will certainly repay you. What are you planning to do now? Don't worry about money. Will you spend the night in the park once more? When I inquired, she looked down and remained silent, clearly concerned. I can't help but sigh. Is returning to your family still not an option? No, I understand. How about spending some time here at my house? What? Oh, it isn't like that. After realizing how that sounded, I quickly added, You will never again sleep in the park. This is my opinion. I explained, a little uneasy, and Emily laughed softly. I recognize. Then I will accept your offer. She smiled and nodded. We returned to my apartment, where I prepared a simple lunch and let her take a shower. Emily seemed delighted and ate a lot, despite the fact that dinner was only a stir-fry of chicken and vegetables. It was very tasty. I haven't had a warm supper in a long time as a thank you. I will cook tomorrow. Are you a cook? That sounds exciting to me then. She smiled shyly. So don't expect anything fancy. I got her some basic necessities because she was going to be staying for a while, but she insisted on wearing my clothes instead of new ones. She replied, wearing one of my baggy shirts, I feel bad because you bought clothes for me, which increased my heart rate. Living with Emily made my previously boring life unexpectedly more enjoyable. She always greeted me with a smile in the morning. Good morning. After breakfast, she'd send me on my way to work. I wish you a pleasant day. And she would greet me upon my return when I arrived home. In the evenings, we would talk and watch television. We slept in separate rooms but did not share a bed with her present. These ordinary times became incredibly enjoyable. Has my smile always been so big? I used to have a very stern expression because I was constantly buried in literature. However, I have noticed that I'm constantly smiling these days. Even I was surprised to discover that I was humming while working or walking home. My coworkers frequently made fun of me for the change, asking, Did anything nice happen? Richard, you seem to be content these days. Have you found a girlfriend? Around this time, I had a crucial realization. I am in love with her. I hope we can stay together forever. She is still in high school, however, and I am currently her guardian. Taking everything into consideration, I found it difficult to express my emotions. So, what do you think about me? Emily asked me one day. Maybe. Tired of waiting? She crossed her arms. I paused, saying, Well, Emily Salt, and urged her to be explicit. Okay, I'll start now. I believe I have fallen in love with you, Richard. What? Her unexpected confession filled me with excitement and elation. I am grateful. I also enjoy you, Emily. She grinned widely. So you're going to stay here? I plan to drop out of school and get a job, but what she said brought me back to earth. However, I also want to be with you. How about your parents? You are still underage. This cannot be kept secret indefinitely. She gave a headshake. Not necessary. I live it. However, I grasped her hands and looked her in the eyes. You don't need to explain why you left your house. In fact, I do not know. However, this cannot be how we continue to live. People will not understand why a high school student is living with a stranger for any reason. Your parents may be concerned for you at the very least. Give them your location. But she yelled no with conviction, stopping me. Certainly not. You will be hurt if we contact them. I will be harmed for a split second. I hoped that the fear would subside. Is there something wrong that has happened? It is all right. I will make amends with you, via ease about me. Emily hesitantly agreed to call her father. After much convincing, I'll come home tomorrow with the person I'm with. I was concerned about our future together, but I braced myself when I heard the commotion on the other end of the line. 1 week to the day after Emily moved in, a black high-end vehicle pulled up in front of my apartment building, and the intercom beeped loudly. I was terrified when I opened the door and saw an odd-looking man who began threatening me. Hey, give us that girl! Emily appeared behind me as I stopped screaming. Timothy, why are you in this location? Timothy's face turned white when he saw her in my large sweater, and he reached for my collar. How did you harm her? You'd better be ready to accept accountability. It was obvious that you misinterpreted our relationship. Emily moved quickly to stop him. "Timothy, stop." He was the one who offered me assistance with an intense scowl. She asked anyway, "How did you know I was present?" Timothy, who had appeared confident just moments before, fell silent and began to stutter. Emily murmured, "Well, it must be Dad's fault." "Okay, I'll take care of that." She went back inside and changed into her uniform before returning outside. I carefully inquired, still perplexed, "Is it your father?" Emily nodded, obviously understanding what I was asking. "He is, in fact, the gang boss. I did not want to tell you because of this." I gave a strange look and said, "Yeah, I figured you'd come with me to apologize, right?" Emily pressured me. "Nevertheless." I nodded after inhaling deeply. I knew this day would come as soon as I took her in. After putting on my best suit, I got in the waiting car and drove Emily to her family's home. Her father gave her a warm hug and began to cry as he said hello to Emily. "When you disappeared, I was very concerned. I believed you were kidnapped." I was taken aback by his unexpected devotion. Her father turned to give me a pointed look. "My daughter, seeing my surprise, told me you were living with her. You must have meant it with seriousness, right?" His expressions toward his daughter and me were so dissimilar that I broke out in cold sweats from fear and anxiety as he pressed closer to me. But Emily's voice rose, and her cheeks expanded. "Dad, this is exactly why I dislike you. How many more times will you wreck my relationships later on?" I discovered that Emily's father would scare away any boys who dared to approach her by telling them, "You should be serious about my daughter." Unfazed, her father stated gravely, "Of course, I refuse to give my beloved daughter to someone who isn't willing to provide her with a lifetime of happiness." Emily, however, refused to give up. "That implies that you cannot simply arrange a marriage for me and a stranger in order to increase your power." As it turned out, her father was attempting to arrange for her to meet the son of another gang boss. Her father replied, his expression stern, "People with ordinary backgrounds cannot understand our world. Did all of the boys you were close to leave? Being with someone who understands our lives is ideal for you." Emily bit her lip, attempting not to cry as she heard those words. I was calmly watching this discussion when I felt a rush of rage. I yelled violently at her father, forgetting the terror I had experienced earlier. "Are you actually a father? Children are not possessions. After 3 days in the park, her malnutrition and dehydration nearly killed her. How come you can't see your seriousness?" "Sleeping in the park for 3 days." Emily overheard her father ask her. "Emily, why haven't you called?" Emily responded as his face became pale. "I wanted you to know how serious I was," giving him a direct look. "My happiness is something I choose. I refuse to marry the person you chose for me." Her subsequent remarks astounded me, despite my admiration for her bravery. Her words, "I am going to marry him," were directed at me. "What?" I unintentionally blurted out. Timothy, who had been listening quietly next to us, gave me a stern look and said the words, "I knew it," in a hurry. I responded, No. I took no action. She's still underage." Timothy's expression did not change. Meanwhile, her father said something. "I am glad to hear that. I want you to see my daughter, but I'll pay you for having her stay with you for 1 week." He attempted to hand me a bundle of cash that he had taken from his wallet. I shook my head, saying, "No, I don't need these things, but I can't do nothing now that I'm aware of the situation. I cannot allow her to return to this house. If you're going to keep her confined, I'll make her happy," I said resolutely, tears in my eyes. Emily turned to face me and said, "Richard." Her father chuckled and said, "Well, you've got guts." After witnessing this, "Take Emily with you if you're willing to take responsibility for her life. I will give you custody of my daughter." Emily received an ultimatum from her father. "Go ahead and be with him if that's what you really want. But we are going to cut our family ties. You will never be permitted to return. I'm listening closely." Timothy stepped in with a quick pass. "You don't need to go that far." Her father, however, put an end to it, stating that she would be happier living a normal life. Emily and I bowed in gratitude. "Thank you. But if you could please attend our wedding, you should be there for her on this special day, since you're her father," her father replied, appearing to soften slightly. "Okay." Timothy was instructed to turn the car around. "I swear to be her father until I see her in her wedding gown," he stated. Emily's father turned away from her, holding a brief. "I'm not leaving you." But Emily appeared hesitant to return inside the house. He said, "Go now." I saw the sadness in her father's eyes and felt a twinge of guilt, but I got in the car. Timothy gave me a stern warning as he drove us back to the flat. "Remember, no touching her before the wedding." I get it. I recognize. I swear Emily and I agreed that she would finish high school, and I remained her guardian until that point. I informed my parents about our engagement and introduced her to them around that time. They were surprised to learn that my fiancé was a high school student and the daughter of a gang leader. However, they respected our determination to stand by and love one another, and they even gave us their blessing. Finally, Emily's high school graduation day arrived. We had a small wedding with only immediate relatives at a small chapel on the outskirts of town. Emily's father arrived promptly after the ceremony, escorting her down the aisle and handing her over to me. This concludes our conversation. Before leaving the chapel, he said, "Take care." He climbed into his black car and drove away. Despite our hasty pursuit, we lost contact with him. After that, eventually his old house was cleared. We later learned that he had disbanded the gang he inherited. Since the group was disintegrating, he had gone on to start a new life somewhere. Emily would cry when she thought of her father, but she would also bravely smile and say we shouldn't get in the way of his choice. I will soon become a mother. We were expecting a child a few years after our wedding. I whispered to Emily, softly patting her belly, "Let's hire a detective to find your father after the baby is born." He was a stubborn man, but he would have wanted to see his grandchild. Emily placed her palm over mine and smiled slightly, saying, "You are really brave, but I'm glad I decided to be with you." During the interim, I continued to work as a librarian. Shortly after our baby was born, I was working at the library as usual when someone unexpectedly came in. Emily's father astounded me with his earnestness. He took a seat and started reading a book. When I saw the book's title, I knew what was going on. "Sir, it's you, right?" I yelled as I chased him as he tried to flee at closing time. He spun around in surprise and tried to flee. I urged while holding his wrist, "Please do not run away like your daughter." He gave up and stopped. "This ends my shift. Could you please come to see Emily? Our son was born recently." An emotion flashed in his eyes. He replied, "No, I am too busy." "Are you not at liberty? You aren't working right now, right?" I pointed to the book he was holding and mentioned that it was a weekday and the book was about job hunting. It was clear that he was currently unemployed. Then he begged, "Please keep Emily in the dark." Due to his age and gang history, he had attempted to find new employment but had encountered difficulties. He looked hurt and said, "I do not want Emily to know about this pathetic situation." "With all due respect, I believe you've improved significantly since the last time," I responded. "More humane, perhaps." "Back then, you were extremely dangerous," he shot back. "What have you said?" Angered, I grinned and continued, "Emily is excited to see you. She will accept you as you are right now." He reluctantly agreed to accompany me home. Emily seemed astounded when we arrived. She hugged her father and began crying immediately. "Father, where have you been all this time?" As he hugged his daughter, her father started crying. We moved in together after that. He continued to look for work while caring for his grandchild and helping with housework. I practiced interviews with him and helped him with his resume, but I couldn't help but criticize him throughout. "This resume's handwriting is too sloppy, and flawless writing is not required. Try to make it readable. It's critical that you smile warmly during the interview rather than eerily. Your voice is extremely frightening. Try speaking more softly." I understood why he had trouble finding work. Both his interview style and resume required improvement. He was eventually hired by a company because of the advice I gave him. He now spends his days following orders from superiors, which is a change from before, but he enjoys his job. Working with others gives me a sense of fulfillment. He smiled one evening after finishing his shift, and Emily said, "I'm glad you finally turned into a great person, Dad. You can now gladly serve as my child's grandfather."